Today's drawing will be more serious. I usually only draw from the chest up, but for today I will go lower and lower and lower from the crotch up. If I don't sound very energetic, I apologize. I just lost a package today. First, let's talk references. This is the main reference for today's video. It is the one and only Tresan. Is it too much to ask to have like 100 clones of him being sent to my place? Hopefully they don't get lost like the package I lost today. Sorry, I'm just so bitter about my lost package. Anyway, I still use Pinterest to look for references. Yes, I know the controversy surrounding Pinterest. It shows a shit ton of AI and ads, but I don't know where else to look for references. If you guys have any recommendations, you can let me know in the comments. On Pinterest, I usually use keywords like male, 3/4 portrait, or black and white portrait, or just type in a K-pop idol's name. Right, moving on. So I have these two I'll hate them fan arts because we're drawing him today. And look at the rendering. Can you eat a rendering? Because I'm feeling a very strong urge to do so. I also have some references for muscles, just in case. This picture of sun is gorgeous, no doubt, but the lighting isn't the best. So these are the pictures of the mood, the color scheme, and lighting, and also the background that I'm going for in today's video. And yeah, surprise, we're drawing a background today. Just a simple one though, okay? I'm a realistic person. This one is an additional reference for the face anatomy because Sun's face is covered by his hand. This is just a random Samsung watch for the accessory I'm going for. Now I start by drawing the silhouette as a guide for my sketch. I tried doing like 3D shapes for anatomy once, but turns out my 3D visualization is kinda trash. I can't imagine 3D. That's not good for an artist, right? Anyway, use a big round brush for the silhouette, and since the arm is directly on top of his body, you can also use a different color to indicate the arm, but I'm just gonna stick with blue. Next, I draw the rough sketch on top of the silhouette. Now, the sketch doesn't have to perfectly match the silhouette. Sometimes it's smaller, sometimes it's larger. Totally fine. At this stage, don't focus on the details or face anatomy. Well, yes, focus on the face anatomy, but doesn't have to be perfect. Just indicate where the eyes, nose, and mouth are. Next, I draw circles for the joints. Then connect them with lines and fill them in with shapes. I don't usually separate the torso into ribs, waist, and hips, but rather, I focus on the curve of the body. If I separated the torso into 3, it would be too rigid. Now I'm exaggerating the curve a bit more. And just to be clear, there is nothing wrong with Sun's body curve, okay? The man is sculpted like a Greek statue. I just exaggerate it a little so the silhouette looks more dynamic, even though the pose is just standing there. So this is the comparison. The second one kind of gives scoliosis, but it's not that bad, I guess. Also, all Al-Haytham does is he reads books. I'm surprised there's nothing wrong with his spine and he got crazy abs instead. Not that I'm complaining though. Alright, now we can move on to the clean sketch. I'm starting with the face. I've been drawing faces for years so I can kinda eyeball the shape and proportion, but if you're still figuring that part out, find more references. For semi-realism, I suggest using your favorite artist's art so you also learn how to simplify them. I draw bald heads first because I have a tendency to draw the hair too big, so I want to match the head and body proportions before adding the hair. Next, draw big shapes for the arm muscles. Don't worry about the details like ripples and veins. At this stage, it's all about the big shapes. I start the hands really simply like mittens, but with joints and thumb. Then separate the 4 fingers. The fingers are pressed together so it's easier to draw. Then I draw the body in a separate layer so I can fix it easier and move on to drawing the other hand. I don't know why, but drawing the fingers balled up like this, it's easier than drawing the fingers played out. I guess I just have a hard time drawing long stuff, you know. But I do like long things, like almond, chocolate, pepero sticks. Can't get enough. Now we can draw the hair. I start with a buzz cut to determine the hairline. Oh my god, this actually looks good. You know, Al-Haytham would look really good in a buzz cut. I'm contemplating between his regular hairstyle or showing his forehead. I think regular hairstyle would cover up his eyes though. Look, Genshin men are all attractive, but why cover up their forehead? Do they have forehead insecurity or something? Well, I guess Risley has his forehead shown, so he's kind of like a pioneer in Genshin men's forehead openness, you know. Okay, so you can separate the parts so you can fix them easily during rendering. But I just know that I will draw on wrong layers 90% of the time. So I merge all the clean sketch layers and slather them in the same color. Whatever happens, happens. Like my lost package. I also set this layer to multiply and began adding the base color. Nothing special in this stage, so let's just skip this. I merged the clean sketch and the base color together. Then I'm adding soft shadows with an airbrush on a multiply layer. Actually like having some of the skin shading blend into the hair or the shirt. It looks more natural somehow. For the hard shadow, I made another multiply layer and used flat watercolor opaque brush. I mentioned this brush in almost all of my videos and there are still people asking me what my brush is. I swear to God, if I get another question about my brush, I will probably still mention my brush in the future videos, but know that I won't be very happy about it. Add a bit more saturation when applying hard shadows, just a tiny bit so the shading's not too gray. For example, I add a bit of red to the skin shadows and some teal into the hair. Not too saturated though, it will be very hard to control the colors later on. Okay, now I will test the color scheme and the background from the references. I usually do this if I have to draw backgrounds to get the look and feel from the overall painting. This is probably the first time you guys see me do this because I always draw floating hats and thirst traps this past year. Having a circle as the background is never wrong. It's simple, it directs more attention to the portrait. I add the cast shadow by coloring the duplicated Al-Haytham in pure black, set it to multiply, clipped it to the circle, and just moved it a little. Now it looks like a spotlight. Easy, right? For the rendering, I basically painted over the sketch, starting with the darkest shadow and of course the nose. This has become a habit for me. If I don't get the nose right, I can't move on to anything else. Now obviously, I won't be explaining how I render each facial features one by one because this video will be 2 hours long. Unless that's what you guys want, me yapping for 2 hours straight telling you what to do, like my mom does 7 days a week, 365 days a year. I'm sorry mom, please do not stop giving me food. Anyway, rendering can make your painting lose definition. So for small parts like the facial feature, I usually add line art after I paint over the sketch. For bigger parts like the arms and neck, I use a color darker than the shadow but lighter than the line art to redefine and add details. Treat the body as 3D objects. So try to imagine how the skin wraps around the muscles and bones and how the clothes wrap around the body, things like that. I see some of you are confused, but I'm too lazy to create an example, so I'm using Eva's boobie from my previous video. So the skin is wrapped like this around his big pectoral muscle. So the shadow would look something like this. Remember how we shade circles? The concept is pretty much the same. And the tank top would follow the boobie. Now granted, not all body parts are pecs and rounded. For example, the back of the hand would be rendered differently because of its small bones and veins. Find more detailed references if you're struggled with it. If real-life photos feel too complex, try looking at how other artists simplify their shading. Aside from the face, I usually don't render that neatly. I still want to keep that painterly look, like, you know, oil paintings. Anyway, I think this half of his face should be pushed back a little. So I cut it off and moved it on the layer below. Yeah, don't hesitate to do this if you think the anatomy is off and liquify doesn't help. But remember to duplicate the layer first so you would have less regret in life. Also, I don't know why, the more I render, Al-Haytham is smiling. I don't know how it came to this. Is this drawing cursed? Am I in danger? Before we're diving into hair, I will render the eyes a bit more, like adding red for the waterline. Yeah, I just learned it's waterline. And draw his eyebrows. My drawing always look 10 times better after I draw the eyebrows. I guess eyebrows are everything. Alright, let's get into the hair rendering. If I sound tired, that's because I am. And I'm still pissed about my missing package. Rendering hair is sucking the life out of me. What's that? It's not that different from my normal speaking voice? Well, that's not good, is it? Okay, I actually experimented with Alhaitham's original hairstyle because I thought it would be easier to render. However, it covers up his entire eyebrows. So I don't think it's worth it. So bangs up it is. You know who draws great bangs up hairstyle? Chinese artist. I'm using this picture from Junyuan on Xiaohongshu as references. See how the inner part of the bangs is lighter and it gives a pretty glow to the hair? That's what we're going for. Rendering hair is something that I have yet to master because it's so complicated. Fong, you should consider it as a ball because the head is a ball. Yeah, I understand the theory, but I'm not rendering a smooth ball here. It's a ball covered with hair. Ew. The method I always use by far is the Hyundai logo method. So shade it like this, like a Hyundai logo, and do the same thing for the highlight. Hair loses definition fast during rendering, even more than the skin. So don't hesitate to redraw the hair shape using a dark color on a separate layer. Don't forget to add shadow where the hair is overlapping for dimension so the hair doesn't look flat. At first I struggled to paint the back of Alhaitham's head. Doesn't it look like, and I'm really sorry for this, but doesn't it look like kinda a duck's buttocks? It's kinda cute actually. Now we'll move on to the other part of the hair. It's important to pay attention which part is the outer and which part is the inner. And just because the inner part is lighter doesn't mean the outer part is completely dark. It's only darker the closer it is to the roots. Also, I overlaid some skin color to the lower part of the hair so it looks more natural. Again, don't hesitate to redraw the hair if it's starting to lose shape. Okay, let's move on to the hand before this turns into a hair rendering video. The back of the hand is kinda tricky because of the small and slender bones in it. I keep the shadow solid so it doesn't get blurry and lose definition. Pay attention to the lighter shadows or midtones so the hand doesn't look flat. You can use line art to draw the knuckles and redefining the bones, but for more realistic look, try to build the shapes with shadows only. I'm only line arting the outer part so it doesn't blend in with the face. I usually paint the fingernails with dark colors first, fill them with the skin color, and then add highlights. By the way, I changed Alhaitham's expression so he's not smiling anymore. Smiling one doesn't really look like Alhaitham. It has too much positive energy and I don't think I like that. Anyway, for the accessories, I'm using an outline brush because it's easier to draw small things with it. I just randomly searched for a Samsung watch as a reference and this one surprisingly has Alhaitham's color palette. Even has a little speck of orange like Alhaitham's eye. Should I buy this watch? By the way, for accessories or object references, I suggest looking up Pixel Squid. It has tons of 3D models. Let's see, for example, let's look for a lantern. Yeah, you can rotate them to your preferred angle and just screenshot it and trace it. Simple. I added a green diamond in the Samsung watch to match the one in Alhaitham's chest and add more details on it. Without any further ado, let's start with the background. I covered the entire canvas with a very dark red. It's actually almost pure black. Then I applied red on a hard light layer. Notice that I don't really use red but muted brown. But in a hard light layer, it turns red. Experiment with different blending modes to get the color you like. And who knows, sometimes you might get surprised by the result. I will call Alhaitham back in and I'll make him bigger. Like maybe waist up, so we can see his face better. Next, we're drawing the circle. I'm trying different blending modes for it and hard light looks the best. Hard light is really the winner in today's video. To add shadows or edit the circles though, you might wanna switch to normal layers first because the circle's actual color is yellow. It only becomes red when it's on hard light. And that is all for the background. Super easy, right? Of course, we have to make color adjustments on Alhaitham so it doesn't look like a sticker willy-nilly slapped on a red circle. I first darken the shadows with multiply, then I use overlay to add more saturated color. Since overlay makes any color lighter and more saturated, I used a muted red for this. I also used soft light to add more red so it looks like Alhaitham is affected by the red spotlight. Then with multiply, I made half circle for the shadow. I also colored the rim with red for subsurface scattering effect. Next, I'm adding the cast shadow like I showed you guys in the beginning of this video. You guys still remember? Are you paying attention? There will be test by the end of this video. Then I use Gaussian blur to blur the shadows. I like how there's instantly a red rim around the shadow because I'm placing it on top of the hard light circle. I think the cast shadow would be better if I place it here. Now I'm using the add layer to add the fire behind his hand, so it looks like he's lighting up a lighter. But whatever he has behind his hand is actually up to your interpretation. It could be a lighter, it could be a firefly, it could be the Ark of the Covenant. It's up to you. Now this is my favorite part, adding gradient maps. I grouped all the layers, then duplicated into one layer. Then I apply the gradient maps. There are a lot to choose from, but I always like the classic blue-red gradient. Set the layer to soft light, lower the opacity, and look at that. Look at those colors, the depth and dimension. Chills. And lastly, I of course use the unsharp mask filter. And look at that, Fong finally draws someone crouched up with a background. Well, yes, in the end we chopped him into waist up and the background is very simple, 6-year-old could do it, but doesn't matter. And yeah, I guess that's about it. And bye-bye.